I knew something was wrong before I knew what it was. That's how it always starts, not with proof, but with a feeling that shows up early and refuses to leave. My wife Evelyn came home at 9:47 p.m. on a Monday and said nothing important had happened. That was the first lie. Important things always leave marks, even when you pretend they don't. We'd been married 9 years. Long enough to learn each other's rhythms, long enough to stop asking follow-up questions. We had a quiet life built on routine: coffee at 6, dinner at 7, lights out by 11. No drama. No surprises. I thought that meant safety. I was wrong. I was sitting at the kitchen table when she came in, paperwork spread in front of me, the kind of work that pays slowly and never thanks you. Evelyn hung her coat, kicked off her shoes, and smiled at me like she was returning from a place I wasn't invited to. "You eat?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. I hadn't. She nodded and went to the sink, washing her hands longer than usual. That's when I noticed the smell, not perfume exactly, more like the echo of one. Warm. Unfamiliar. Not something you pick up from an office hallway or a grocery store aisle. "Long day?" I asked. "Meetings," she said. "Too fast." One-word answers are for questions you don't want explored. I watched her reflection in the dark window. She looked tired, but not the way work makes you tired. This was the kind of exhaustion that comes from holding a shape that isn't yours. That night she put her phone face down on the nightstand. She'd never done that before. I didn't say anything. I don't rush things. Rushing makes noise, and noise scares the truth away. The next day, she left earlier than usual. Said she needed to stop by a place called Northline Café before work. Said it casually, like she'd been saying it for years. She hadn't. I drove past Northline that afternoon on instinct alone. It sat on the edge of the city, brick walls, wide windows, the kind of place people go when they don't want to be seen by anyone they know. Her car was there. I stayed in mine, hands on the wheel, heart working too hard. I watched through the glass as she laughed. Not the polite laugh she used at parties. This one came from somewhere lower, freer. A man sat across from her. Dark jacket. Easy posture. He leaned in like he had time and confidence to spare. She touched his arm when she spoke. That was the second lie. I left before they did. I needed to remember the way home. Needed to remind myself that my life still existed outside that window. That evening, Evelyn told me the cafe had been closed. I nodded. I always nodded. But something inside me had already shifted. Once you see the door crack open, you stop pretending the house is sealed. That night, lying beside her in the dark, I listened to her breathing and realized something colder than anger. She wasn't afraid of losing me yet. And that meant the story was just beginning. Once suspicion settles in, everything sharpens. Sounds get edges. Words start carrying weight they didn't have before. I woke up the next morning already tired, like I'd spent the night arguing with someone who never answered back. Evelyn moved through the apartment quietly, efficient, careful. Too careful. She kissed my cheek on her way out, the same place she always did, like muscle memory could cover new ground. Then she picked up her phone, hesitated, and slipped it into her bag instead of her coat pocket. That hesitation stayed with me all day. I tried to work. I really did. Numbers on the page, names in a file, ordinary problems that used to hold my attention. But my mind kept drifting back to Northline Café. The way she'd leaned forward. The way he'd leaned back, relaxed, like he knew the ending to a story I was only just reading. At noon I did something I hadn't planned on doing. I drove. I told myself it was coincidence, that I needed lunch, that the city pulls you where it wants if you don't resist. Northline sat exactly where I remembered it, pretending to be harmless. Her car wasn't there this time. That should have comforted me. It didn't. Instead, I noticed other things: the side street behind the café, the small parking lot that curved out of sight, the way the back door stayed cracked open like it was expecting someone. Places like that don't advertise. They wait. That evening, Evelyn came home earlier than usual. She was lighter somehow. Not happier, lighter. Like she'd put something down. "How was work?" she asked. "Same," I said. She nodded, satisfied with the answer. Then she started talking about weekend plans. Groceries. Laundry. Normal things people discuss when they're trying to sound anchored. I watched her hands while she spoke. They kept opening and closing, restless. "Who was the guy at the café?" I asked. The question landed clean. No anger. No accusation. Just a stone dropped into water. She froze, not dramatically. Just enough. "What guy?" she said. "The one you laughed with." She turned toward me slowly, eyes searching my face like she was checking how much I knew. "You followed me?" "No," I said. "I saw you." That was true. Truths matter, even when they're incomplete. Her shoulders softened, and for a moment I thought she might tell me everything. Instead, she chose something else. "He's nobody," she said. "Just someone from work." We ran into each other. Ran into. Another careful phrase. "Does he have a name?" I asked. "Yes." "And?" She looked away. "It doesn't matter." That was the third lie. We ate dinner in near silence. Not the comfortable kind. The kind where every sound is too loud and every pause too long. When she went to shower, I sat alone at the table and stared at the empty chair across from me. I realized then that whatever was happening wasn't accidental. It had shape. Direction. Momentum. Later that night, her phone lit up on the nightstand. She turned it face down without looking at the screen. I didn't reach for it. I didn't need to. Somewhere between the lies she'd told and the ones she hadn't yet, I understood something important. She was already living a parallel life. And I was standing at the edge of it, deciding whether to step closer, or end it before it swallowed me whole. I lay awake long after she fell asleep, listening to the city breathe through the windows, and made myself a promise. I wouldn't guess anymore. I would know. Once you decide to look, the world starts cooperating. I didn't hire anyone. I didn't need gadgets or tricks. People in the middle of something forbidden make the same mistake every time: they believe the present will last. That belief makes them careless. Evelyn started changing her schedule without changing her explanations. Late meetings that didn't match her calendar. Errands that took longer than traffic could justify. She stopped asking where I was going when I left the apartment. That one hurt more than the lies. It meant she'd stopped needing reassurance. On Thursday she said she was meeting a colleague after work. She didn't say where. She didn't say who. She kissed me like it was a habit she was afraid to break. I followed at a distance that felt like restraint instead of fear. She didn't go to Northline this time. She drove farther east, into a part of the city that tried hard not to be memorable. Closed storefronts. A dry cleaner that still used hand-painted signs. A bar called the Low Lantern, its windows tinted just enough to hide faces but not intentions. I parked across the street and waited. Waiting is its own kind of violence. You sit with your thoughts and try not to sharpen them into weapons. They arrived separately. She first. Him 5 minutes later. He didn't rush. Men who rush don't last long in other people's marriages. They sat near the back. I could see silhouettes through the glass, leaning close enough to share air. I couldn't hear them. I didn't need to. Her body already spoke a language I recognized, and one I no longer belonged to. I left before they did. At home, I poured a drink and let it sit untouched. When Evelyn came in later, she looked flushed, alive in a way she hadn't been with me for months. "Good night?" I asked. She hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah. Just, a lot of talking. Talking leaves fewer marks than truth, but it still costs something." That night she reached for me in bed. I stayed still. Not cold, controlled. "Are you okay?" she asked softly. "No," I said. And for once, I didn't explain. She turned away, confusion replacing confidence. I stared at the ceiling and felt something inside me lock into place. Not anger. Resolve. The next morning, I began organizing my life the way you do when you suspect it's about to be rearranged without your consent. Documents. Accounts. Timelines. I didn't confront her. Confrontation gives people a chance to rewrite the story. I wanted the original draft. By Sunday, I knew 3 things for certain. She wasn't planning to leave me, yet. He thought he had time. And I was the only one in the room who understood what that meant. Somewhere between betrayal and discovery, there's a narrow space where choices still matter. I stood there longer than most men would. Long enough to feel the weight of it. Then I stepped forward. Knowing someone's name changes the temperature of things. Grant Hale stopped being a shadow once I said it out loud. He became weight. Shape. A man who existed in the same city, breathed the same air, and thought he could borrow parts of my life without paying interest. I didn't rush to him. Men who rush make mistakes. I let the days do their work. Evelyn started living in increments, 30 minutes here, an hour there. Borrowed time. That's what it was. She carried it like contraband, always checking the doors, always listening for sirens that never came. She smiled more. Slept less. Asked fewer questions. That last part told me everything. I ran Grant the way I'd run any subject when the truth mattered. Not deep, just enough. Enough to know his habits. Enough to know where he felt safe. Tuesday mornings he worked out. Thursdays he drank at the Low Lantern. Sundays he bought groceries at a market that overpriced tomatoes and sold the illusion of taste. He liked routines. Men like that always do. Routines convince them the world is manageable. I chose Thursday. The Low Lantern was dim in a way that forgave bad decisions. I took a seat at the bar, ordered something brown, and waited. He came in exactly when he always did. Same confidence. He scanned the room once, not looking for me, because men like him don't imagine consequences sitting quietly. I didn't confront him. I let him notice me. Eye contact is a language. When it finally landed, I saw recognition flicker, just a spark. He knew who I was. Evelyn had shown him pictures. Men like him always ask. He finished his drink fast and left. That told me more than words ever could. At home, Evelyn was restless. She talked about work without naming names. She asked if I was angry. I told her no. That unsettled her more than shouting would have. "Do you trust me?" she asked. The question wasn't about trust. It was about permission. "I trust facts," I said. She went quiet after that. That night, I lay awake and thought about endings. Not dramatic ones. Practical ones. Endings that leave people standing instead of bleeding. By morning, I'd made my choice. Not revenge. Not forgiveness. Control. Because once you know the truth, the only mistake left is pretending you don't. Once a decision settles in, it brings a strange peace with it. Not relief, clarity. I stopped watching Evelyn. Not because I didn't care, but because I already knew enough. Surveillance is for doubt. I was past that. What I needed now was positioning. I took a personal day from work and did something I hadn't done in years. I walked the city without purpose. When you're always hunting answers, you forget what it feels like to let them come to you. I passed Northline Café and didn't look inside. Passed the Low Lantern and didn't slow down. Those places belonged to a version of me that was already fading. Instead, I went to a small office above a tailor shop downtown. A woman named Marianne Cole worked there, divorce attorney, reputation for efficiency, no interest in drama. I'd crossed paths with her once years ago on a fraud case. She remembered me. "You don't look surprised," she said after I told her why I was there. "I'm not," I replied. She nodded, already pulling a folder. "That usually means you're ahead of this." "Good." We talked timelines. Options. Quiet exits versus loud ones. I told her I wanted control, not spectacle. She smiled once at that, thin, professional. "Then don't confront yet," she said. "People give away leverage when they panic." I left her office lighter, not because things were better, but because they were defined. That evening, Evelyn cooked dinner. Real dinner. Music playing softly. Candles she claimed had been sitting and used for months. She was trying to restore balance without admitting it had tipped. I watched her move around the kitchen and felt something sharp press against my ribs, not love, not hatred. Loss. The clean kind that doesn't ask permission. "Can we talk?" she asked, finally. "We are," I said. She sat across from me, fingers wrapped tight around her glass. "You've been distant." "You've been busy," I said. She looked down. "I never meant to hurt you. Intent is a luxury you talk about when damage is already done." "I believe you," I said, and I did. That didn't change anything. Her eyes filled, just slightly. "I don't want to lose you." That was the truth, finally. Not because she loved me the way she once had, but because losing me meant consequences. A different life. Uncertainty. I reached across the table and covered her hand. The gesture surprised us both. "Then be honest," I said. "Not all at once. Just from now on." She nodded quickly, grateful for the lifeline. She mistook restraint for mercy. That night, she slept easily. I didn't. I lay awake planning exits, not explosions. Thinking about what survives after trust collapses. Thinking about Grant Hale and how little he understood the situation he'd stepped into. Some men think they're winning because no one stopped them yet. They mistake silence for ignorance. I closed my eyes and let the future take shape, quiet, deliberate, inevitable. Truth doesn't need force. It needs time and somewhere to land. Evelyn tried harder after that conversation. You could see it in the details, the way she asked about my day and waited for the answer, the way she left her phone face up on the table like an offering. She was adjusting, not confessing. Repairing symptoms, not the cause. Grant didn't adjust at all. That told me who understood the situation and who didn't. I didn't reach out to him directly. I let the environment do the work. People reveal themselves when the ground shifts under their feet. Thursday night, Evelyn said she was staying late again. She explained too much, which meant she was nervous. I nodded, wished her luck, and stayed home. Instead of following her, I went somewhere else, near Marianne's office building. Not inside. Just nearby. There's something clarifying about sitting in your car near a place where decisions get finalized. At 8:12 p.m. my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I answered without speaking. "You don't need to do this," a man said. Calm, but strained. He'd rehearsed the tone, not the message. "Do what?" I asked. A pause. Then, "You know who this is?" "Yes," I said. "I do." Another pause. Longer. The silence between us was heavy with misunderstanding. She told me you were volatile, Grant said carefully. I wanted to handle this like an adult. I almost laughed. Almost. An adult, I repeated. Is that what you've been doing? He exhaled. Look, I don't want trouble. I care about her. That word again. Care. It's flexible. People stretch it to cover all kinds of behavior. Then you should leave, I said. I can't just. You can, I cut in. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. You just haven't yet. He went quiet. I imagined him gripping his phone, realizing too late that he'd stepped into a conversation without leverage. She said you were stepping back, he said finally. She said a lot of things, I replied. The call ended without resolution. That was fine. Resolution doesn't come from conversations like that. It comes from consequences. Evelyn came home after 10. She looked shaken. Not guilty, alert. Like someone who'd seen a storm forming offshore. Did Grant call you? She asked. Yes, I said. Her breath caught. What did he say? He said what people say when they think they're negotiating, I replied. She sat down slowly. I didn't want this to get complicated. It was complicated the moment it wasn't just us, I said. She nodded, tears welling, not dramatic, not performative. Real. Too late. I never planned for it to go this far, she whispered. No one does, I said. That's why it does. We sat there in the quiet, the space between us filled with things neither of us could take back. That night, she slept on the couch without asking. That night, I slept well for the first time in weeks. Because the balance had shifted. Grant now knew I existed. Evelyn knew I wasn't blind. And I knew exactly how much pressure it took to crack the illusion they were living in. The next move wouldn't be loud. It would be final. Endings don't announce themselves. They arrive disguised as ordinary days. The morning after Grant's call, Evelyn packed a lunch she didn't eat and kissed me goodbye like she was testing the weight of the word. I watched her leave from the doorway, coat buttoned wrong, hair still damp. She didn't look back. That was new. I spent the morning doing things that looked like nothing, closing a savings account we'd opened together, redirecting my paycheck, scanning old documents and labeling them with dates that suddenly mattered. None of it felt dramatic. It felt necessary. Like bracing a wall before a storm you're done pretending won't hit. At noon, Marianne called. They filed for mediation, she said. Quiet. No accusations. Evelyn's doing. A controlled burn. Good, I replied. Accept. There was a pause. You're sure? Yes. I wasn't interested in punishing her. I was interested in surviving intact. That evening, Evelyn came home early. She didn't go to the couch. She didn't go to the bedroom. She stood in the middle of the living room like someone waiting for instructions. He's leaving town, she said. I didn't ask who. When? I asked. Tomorrow, she replied. He got an offer. Another city. I nodded once. Men like Grant always have somewhere else to go. That's how they avoid learning anything. She watched me closely. Does that change anything? No, I said. And meant it. Her shoulders sagged. The illusion finally collapsed, not with a crash, but with a quiet understanding. I don't know when I stopped being careful, she said. It usually happens when people stop being honest with themselves, I replied. She sat down slowly. What happens now? I took a breath. This was the part that mattered, not the discovery, not the pressure. The naming of the end. We separate, I said. We do it clean. We don't rewrite history or burn it down. We just stop pretending. Tears came then. Real ones. Not bargaining tears. Grief. I never wanted to lose you, she said. I know, I replied. But wanting isn't the same as choosing. She nodded, hands folded like she was holding something fragile. Maybe she was. That night, I packed a bag. Not everything, just enough. When I reached the door, she spoke my name once, softly. I turned. I'm sorry, she said. I believed her. That didn't change the outcome either. I know, I said. Take care of yourself. I closed the door behind me without slamming it. Outside, the city moved like it always had, cars passing, lights changing, people carrying their private endings through public spaces. I stood there for a moment and felt the weight lift, not all of it, but enough to breathe. Some stories don't end with justice or revenge. They end with distance. And sometimes, distance is the only mercy left. The first place I stayed smelled like old carpet and new paint. A short-term rental with furniture chosen by someone who didn't plan to stay long. That fit. I put my bag down, opened the window, and let the city remind me it hadn't ended just because my marriage had. Morning came without ceremony. That surprised me. I expected anger to show up late, knocking loud. Or regret, quiet and persistent. Instead, there was something else, an empty stretch of time that didn't belong to anyone yet. It felt dangerous and honest. Evelyn texted once that day. Just logistics. Dates. Boxes. A question about a lamp that had always flickered. I answered what mattered and ignored what didn't. Boundaries are easier once you stop arguing with yourself. Grant left town like a man slipping out of a party before the music stopped. No goodbye. No explanation. I heard about it secondhand, the way you hear about weather in another state. It registered. It didn't linger. Work filled the gaps. I took cases that kept me moving, nothing domestic, nothing that asked me to sit too long with other people's secrets. I walked more. Slept better. Ate when I was hungry instead of when the clock told me to. One evening, I ran into Marianne outside her office. She studied my face like she was checking her work. You look intact, she said. I am, I replied. Different shape. She nodded. That usually lasts. Weeks passed. Then months. The mediation ended quietly. No courtroom. No witnesses. Just signatures and the soft sound of things being divided fairly because neither of us wanted a war. That might have been the last kindness we gave each other. The day I went back to the apartment to collect the last box, Evelyn wasn't there. She'd planned it that way. I appreciated the thought. The place looked smaller without us in it. Rooms echo when you remove shared history. I took what was mine, books, files, a jacket I'd forgotten I owned, and left the rest to become someone else's memory. At the door, I paused. Not for nostalgia. For acknowledgement. You don't thank a house for shelter when it's done. You just leave. Outside, the air felt clean. Not hopeful. Honest. I walked until the city thinned and the noise softened. I didn't think about what came next. I didn't need to. Some endings teach you what you're capable of surviving. Others teach you what you won't tolerate again. This one taught me both. I kept walking. There's a moment after loss when the world stops asking questions. That's where I found myself. Not lonely. Not free. Just, present. I moved into a smaller place near the river, bare walls, good light, no echoes. I didn't decorate right away. I wanted to see what the rooms asked for before I answered. Turns out they wanted very little. A table. A chair. Space to think without interruption. Evelyn faded the way people do when they become part of your past instead of your present. Not abruptly. Gradually. Her name stopped catching in my throat. Her absence stopped feeling like a sound and started feeling like weather, something you dress for, not something you fight. Once, she called late. No crisis. Just silence on the line before she spoke. "I hope you're well," she said. "I am," I replied. She hesitated. "I'm trying to be." "I know," I said, and meant it. We didn't say goodbye. We didn't need to. Some conversations end because they've said everything they can. After that, there were no more calls. I took a job that kept me moving between cities. Nothing dramatic. Just enough distance to remind me that my life wasn't confined to one address, one version of myself. I met people. Not romantically, not yet. Just people. Conversations without history attached. One night, standing on a balcony overlooking a city that wasn't mine, I realized something quietly profound. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger burns fast. Grief lingers. But acceptance is slow and steady and doesn't announce itself when it arrives. You only notice it because things stop hurting when you touch them. I thought about trust, not as something you give blindly, but as something you build with attention. I thought about love, not as permanence, but as choice, renewed or withdrawn. Evelyn had made her choice. So had I. And the world, indifferent and vast, had kept turning anyway. That was the lesson. Not everyone who leaves ruins you. Some departures simply return you to yourself. I stood there until the city lights blurred into one long breath, then went inside and closed the door, not to keep anyone out, but to mark something finished. It happened when I wasn't looking for it. That's how most real tests arrive. I was back in the city for a week, same streets, different weight. Familiar corners without the ghosts. I took a morning job at a café called Stillwater, a place that didn't rush you and didn't ask questions. I sat by the window with bad coffee and a good notebook, watching people rehearse their lives in public. That's when I saw her. Not Evelyn. Someone else. Her name was Claire. I learned that later, slowly, the way you learn things when you're careful not to need them. She sat 2 tables over, reading a book she wasn't actually reading. You can tell by the way the page never turns. She looked up once, met my eyes, and smiled, not an invitation, not a shield. Just a recognition. Like we were both passing through the same weather. I didn't approach her. That wasn't the point. The point was what didn't happen. My chest didn't tighten. My thoughts didn't race ahead, inventing futures. I didn't compare her to anyone. I didn't measure the moment against an absence. I noticed that, and it stopped me cold. Later that day, I ran into an old friend who knew Evelyn. He hesitated before speaking, like he was stepping onto thin ice. "She seems different," he said. "Quieter." "So do I," I replied. He nodded, relieved not to be holding the weight alone. "You ever regret it?" I thought about that. Not carefully, honestly. "No," I said. "I regret staying longer than I should have." That answer surprised both of us. That night, alone in my apartment, I opened a box I'd been carrying since the separation. Inside were the last things I hadn't sorted, photos, notes, objects without practical use but with emotional residue. I went through them quickly. No ceremony. No anger. I kept one photo, not of us, but of a place we'd once been. A reminder that moments can be real even if they don't last. The rest went back into the box. The box went into the trash. I slept well. In the morning, I walked by Stillwater again. Claire was there. She looked up, smiled, and this time I nodded back. Nothing more. Nothing promised. Somewhere inside me, something held. That's how I knew I was done being defined by what had broken. Not healed. Not transformed. Just, finished. And sometimes, that's enough. Distance changes things. Not by erasing them, but by putting them where they belong. I didn't stay in the city long after that week. Familiar streets can be kind, but they're also persuasive. They try to tell you who you used to be. I wasn't interested in that conversation anymore. Work took me south, then west. Hotels with thin walls. Trains that ran before dawn. Airports where no one looked twice at anyone else. I liked that anonymity. It stripped things down to essentials: movement, purpose, rest. Evelyn became a reference point instead of a presence. Something I could mention without bracing. When her name came up in my head, it no longer brought heat. Just information. That's how you know a wound has closed, not when it stops aching, but when it stops dictating your posture. One night, in a city that smelled like rain and diesel, I ran into Grant. By accident. Truly. He was standing outside a bar, phone pressed to his ear, arguing with someone who wasn't listening. He looked thinner. Less sure. The jacket was gone. So was the ease. He saw me and froze. I waited. I didn't approach. I didn't leave. I let him decide what kind of man he was going to be. He ended the call and took a step toward me, then stopped. The space between us felt deliberate. I didn't expect to see you, he said. No one ever does, I replied. He swallowed. I should have handled things differently. That sentence wasn't for me. It was for him. Probably, I said. He nodded, relief flickering across his face when I didn't press. I hope she's okay. She's alive, I said. That counts for something. He almost smiled. Almost. Then he looked past me, back toward the bar, like it might offer shelter. Take care, he said. You too, I replied, and meant it, in the most distant way possible. He walked away. I stayed where I was, feeling nothing dramatic. No victory. No bitterness. Just the quiet certainty that whatever triangle we'd been caught in had finally collapsed into separate lines. Later, back in my room, I stood by the window and watched traffic move without pattern or memory. Headlights passing. Lives intersecting for seconds, then vanishing. That's when it landed, the final piece. Closure isn't an event. It's the moment you realize you no longer need one. I turned off the light and went to bed, already thinking about the next morning's work, the next city, the next stretch of road. The past stayed where it was. So did I. Time doesn't heal anything by itself. It just gives you room to do the work without an audience. A year passed without ceremony. No anniversary circled on a calendar. No moment where I stopped and said this is it. Life doesn't offer punctuation like that. It just keeps adding lines until you notice the paragraph has changed. I settled into a rhythm that belonged to me alone. Same morning walk. Same diner on the corner that burned the toast and never apologized. Same notebook, half filled with observations that weren't meant for anyone else. I wasn't hiding. I was living unobserved, and that felt earned. Claire drifted back into my life slowly. Not through grand gestures or confessions. Through coincidence. A shared elevator. A passing comment about weather that turned into coffee. Coffee that turned into silence that didn't ask to be filled. She never asked about Evelyn. I never volunteered. That mattered. Trust didn't come roaring back. It arrived on foot, hands visible, asking permission. I respected that. I matched her pace. Whatever we were building didn't need a blueprint yet. One evening, we sat by the river watching the lights break apart on the water. She asked me something simple, the kind of question that used to feel dangerous. Do you believe people can start over? I thought about that longer than the question required. I think, I said, that people don't start over. They continue, just without carrying what finally got too heavy. She nodded, satisfied. She didn't ask what I'd put down. Later, alone, I thought about Evelyn, not with longing, not with resentment, but with clarity. I saw her as she was, not as I'd needed her to be. A person who made choices. A person who lived with them. Same as me. That was the final release. Not forgiveness in the romantic sense. Understanding. I closed my notebook that night and realized I hadn't written about the past in weeks. The story had finished telling itself without my permission. I went to bed with the window open and let the city in. Not as noise. As proof. Some betrayals break you. Some teach you precision. This one taught me how to live without negotiating my own worth. And that lesson stayed. I don't tell this story because it still hurts. I tell it because it doesn't. There's a difference. Pain wants company. Understanding doesn't. Years later, enough that the details have softened without disappearing, I can trace the line cleanly from who I was to who I am. No gaps. No excuses. Just cause and effect, laid end to end like stepping stones across cold water. Evelyn remarried. I heard it the way you hear about weather in a place you no longer live. Claire and I didn't rush into anything permanent, and that turned out to be the right speed. Some things grow best when no one's leaning over them, measuring. As for me, I learned how to sit in silence without interrogating it. I learned that love isn't proven by endurance alone, and loyalty without honesty is just a longer lie. I learned that walking away doesn't always mean losing, it can mean preserving what you'd otherwise have to become to stay. There was no dramatic reckoning. No final confrontation. No moment where the universe clapped. Just a series of choices made quietly, correctly, and without witnesses. That's what stayed with me. Betrayal taught me something I didn't want to learn but needed to know. You don't measure a life by how much pain you can absorb, but by how precisely you refuse it once it shows its face. If there's a lesson here, it's not about suspicion or control or even forgiveness. It's simpler than that. Pay attention. Trust patterns more than promises. And when the truth arrives, don't argue with it. I didn't win. I didn't lose. I continued. And that, in the end, was enough. If you want more stories that spark your imagination, subscribe to the channel and come back for the next chapter. There's always another tale waiting.